Hello guys, and welcome back to the 1943 Willys MB project. How are you all doing? Thanks for checking in today, subscribers, always appreciated. New people, welcome aboard. What we're doing is building a Willys MB from the ground up. So we've got no donor vehicle. I'm just building it all out of parts on its own, hoping that's going to produce a better Jeep at the end of the day than if I'd bought a donor project. Not entirely sure if that's going to work out or not. It is going to work out, but whether it's going to work out cheaper or not, I'm not entirely sure, because there are a lot of parts in a Jeep, would you believe? And we've been spending a lot of money recently. So as you guys can see then, we've moved on from previously. I was working on the axles, and finally I've finished the axles, which is great news, and we'll look at those in a little while. But to start off with them, we'll just look at some parts and some of the things I've been purchasing over the last couple of weeks then, guys, because as I said, a lot of parts going into this vehicle, so I enjoy getting hold of new bits and bobs and finding them and discovering them. That's always quite fun. I'm noticing NOS parts are becoming slightly more difficult to get hold of at the moment, so in the future things may become more difficult, but we've still got some supply going on. So to start off with then, guys, one of the things I'm going to say is thanks to Stavros Vasiliou for supplying me with a free clutch rebuild kit for the clutch. That's really good of him. It's an old Willys 1960s stuff, but this will do really nicely for that. So Stavros out in Greece, where they had a lot of surplus Jeeps, went to, so there's lots of parts out there, and he deals with them, and he's got a couple as well. Good guy to deal with. And also John at Midwest Military. He has created the hat channels which go on the ACM1 tub. So underneath the tub you have these hat channels, and on the late ones they're quite simple, but on the early ones they have this sort of stamped shape to them, and obviously to produce that's not going to be totally straightforward. So what's really good is that John's produced these already and you can buy them. So I would thoroughly recommend, if you're building an ACM1 tub, to get hold of these parts from him while he's producing them, because the quality is really nice and they look great. They're all spot welded and everything like that. It all lines up perfectly on the tub already, so this is ready for the tub to be rebuilt. So really pleased with that then. Other stuff then, guys, you remember the Chepper shafts that I had. These were the NOS Chepper shafts down here, and you know I previously warned about NOS stuff. NOS doesn't always mean NOS. Well, these were stored in greased paper for 70 years, and even though they were well greased up and everything, they can still rust. So I've got some corrosion on these. Fortunately, it's nothing that's actually important. None of the important areas are rusted. Inside the Chepper, the balls and everything like that is completely unrusted, but it took a big hit here on this portion here, but fortunately this doesn't affect anything or matter, but it's just slightly annoying that these have ended up like this. They'll be usable, but they're just not as perfect as I would have liked. But there you go, that's what happens with old bits. Even when they're greasy, they can still turn out to be rusted away inside there, so just be aware of that when you're paying a lot of money for NOS stuff, that it can be less than ideal sometimes, even if it looks great. But having said that, sometimes NOS stuff can be fantastic. So my transfer case I've taken apart here, and we've been having a delve into that. It's all looking pretty good. Some issues to work through, but I got hold of a rear bearing carrier for it, as it's got the late style on there at the moment, so I needed the early style here for the contracting band e-brake. And this is a NOS GPW part here, but you can see this is all fully greased up and is completely NOS. It'll be lovely under there. But it is a GPW piece, sadly, for my MB, but you're not going to be able to tell or notice, but it's just what I was able to get hold of. But that's really nice then, guys. And then another thing which you might find interesting then, this is what we're doing, searching for parts then. We're sort of scraping the barrel here, guys. As you know, the American military has had, it's been around the globe a bit, and they supply vehicles to lots of countries. So these are the conrods I'm going to be using in this engine on this Jeep. And these are for the CJ3, the M606, I think it says on it. M606, yeah, the CJ3 style military vehicle. And these were used by the South Koreans. So this is South Korean NOS conrods in here, made by them under contract. So these will be good military conrods, so the quality will be nice. But just quite interesting there, guys, that you have to go as far afield as South Korea to get hold of parts at the moment then. That's why I'm hoping it's going to be a really good vehicle, because we're bringing all these NOS parts together and all these good brand new parts. And even though cosmetically some of them are not perfect, they're all going to be functionally really great, and you're not going to see the Chepper shafts or anything like that. As long as they're in there working correctly, that's all that we need. At the front there, that's a Willys of France steering column. Okay, so this is the Willys of France one. So this was produced under license by the French for their Jeeps. Strangely enough, the one that I got, unfortunately, with all that package of parts that I got at the start was bent. So right at the end down here where the worm is, when you spin it round, it's bent. I have no idea how that's occurred, but somehow it's got bent. It's probably the only bent steering shaft ever from a Willys Jeep, but there you go. But we've got a nice, really straight Willys of France military-made one, so that's all excellent news, guys. So here they are then, guys, my two axles. This is what I've been working so long on, and I'm really pleased with them. You know, this is a great achievement for me. They look beautiful, they're internally perfect, you know, they're just going to be like the factory ones. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they drive, you know, because the GPW's differentials, which hadn't been rebuilt in 70 years, drove quite nicely, but these are going to be factory new, so it's going to be very interesting to see what they're like. But I'm really pleased with them, guys, and I'm really glad that I did the rebuild with these, because this is the only thing I didn't know how to do properly on a Jeep. You know, differentials were something I'd heard were difficult, so I just thought I'd steer clear of it. But I've worked my way through them and I've got them completed, and I'm really pleased with them. I've learnt a lot with them as well. Changed my opinion on a few things as well. It is a difficult job. It does need preparation, but once you've done a couple of times, you start to get a rhythm and you start to get to know how to do it, and you can take these apart in no time at all. So guys who have done a couple of them in machine shops and things like that, workshops, they can do these quite simply. So practice makes perfect with them, guys. The best thing that I found with these is having a proper puller for the differential carrier bearings, guys. So, you know, I said you need the honed out trial bearings to slide on and off the carrier. You do need those if you're doing a lot of them, and they do make the job much easier. But even carrier bearings which are very similar to the ones you're going to be using, you're still going to have to adjust the shims in the carrier bearings at the end of the day just to make up for the slight differences between them. So initially, guys, for removing the carrier bearings, I started off with this puller here, which it can rotate like this. So when you're screwing it in and you're putting, you know, massive amounts of force through it, it starts to deform and bend. It starts to rotate, should I say. And when it rotates, the legs rotate around and they can fly off. And then also the legs can pull out like this because you're putting a huge amount of force through it, so they pull out. So this sort of puller here is rubbish. You can't use that. That'll just cause you massive headaches and wreck your bearings, and it'll make you want to throw these things in the bin. However, this is the big boy proper puller, guys. This is the bad boy here. This has a locking arm, right? You can see there, which holds these two legs together. So when you're screwing it in and pulling it up, these legs can't pull out. So this is what makes all the difference when removing carrier bearings. This makes a difference between, you know, wrecking the carrier bearings and not being able to remove them, to easily doing it and not damaging them, and not even damaging the shim pack. Actually, when these are put on correctly, it really makes a difference. So this is a must-have, guys. This is what makes a difference between making it an impossible job and a straightforward job, the proper puller. This, in America, you guys can get a cheap OTC one, I think. Snap-on also make a proper one. This is one you can get in the UK, which doesn't seem to be made anymore, but I got hold of one, which was quite good. It was second-hand on Amazon. The other thing, guys, just as some little other things which I found, when marking up the ring gear, the crown gear, you know, you use a marking compound there. Well, there are lots of marking compounds, but I found just using lipstick works really nicely. It's sticky, it stays on there, it makes a good print. It's not, you know, it's not too loose so that it just flows away. If you use lipstick, you can get a good imprint. So use lipstick in there. You don't need to buy any special compounds or anything like that. Make sure you ask your wife, because she might get upset otherwise. And then the other thing, guys, is you need a lot of shims of various types. So if you're looking around and you see shims quite cheap at any point, just grab hold of them, because I spoke to a company in the UK, one of the Jeep supply companies, who I haven't used before actually, and I don't think I will be using. Anyway, I asked them for some shims, and they quoted me £30 for a pack of shims. So you can imagine if you're destroying them each time you're taking apart the carrier bearings, you would get through your £30 quite quickly. So needless to say, I didn't buy shims from them. But if you are looking around and you spot any and you don't need any, just get hold of them just in case for the future, because shims are very, very important. You go through a lot of those as well. And then the other thing, guys, just something interesting is sometimes shafts where the old leather seals run, they get pitting in them. Obviously, the leather seals contain moisture, and when it sits on the shaft, on the face where it runs, it can rust through it. And then when you put your your face is back in there, there's an indent, a indentation where it's all rusted out and everything, and the new seal won't ride properly and it'll leak and all oil will come out. So fortunately they've thought of that, and SKF and another company, I think it's Ready Sleeve, or I can't remember off the top of my head, they make a thing called a Speedy Sleeve here, which is used for where seals run. So all you do is you press this little sleeve on here, and he goes down, you pull off a little collar which is used for helping you when you put it on, and then you've got a new piece of metal there for the seal to run on, where it won't leak out of, which is really good. Can't be used for bearing faces. This is only used for seals because, you know, they're not mechanically sound, but this is really good. This means you can save old shafts which would otherwise leak, so they're worth doing. Quite expensive though, unfortunately. The rest of assembling the axles is just like in a manual. If you follow the manual carefully, you should have no problem. One of the things that people mention is that when you're fitting the kingpins and the arm here, the resistance that you should have in the early manual says, I think, 4 to 6 pounds resistance when you're pulling on here. Well, they changed it later and they increased it up to 12 pounds actually, I think 12 to 14. But it seems to be the consensus online, guys, that you want about 9 pounds of resistance when you're setting up your shims in the kingpins here. So just bear that in mind. More resistance is better. And of course it has to be done before you put the seals on, because obviously you don't want the resistance from the seals affecting your reading. Interesting thing is, once the seal's on, these are NOS old felt seals. On the GPW I had the later M38 seals, which had a neoprene rubber sealing face to them, which are really good, but unfortunately I couldn't get hold of those. But these are the earlier felt ones. But once the felt seals are fitted, they don't bloody move. They're tough as anything. So yeah, make sure your seals aren't fitted, otherwise you won't get a correct reading. But guys, that is it for this week. As you can see, yes, I am very pleased with my axles. We've been painting, we've been doing all sorts of stuff. I've got a new hood as well, the correct earlier style hood, so we'll look at that as well. But hopefully, guys, by next time we're going to have the frame painted and we can start to mount the axles then, and move on from there, start looking at transfer case, transmission, engine, and get the rolling frame together. But until next week, guys, thanks a lot for checking in. Like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this content today, and there'll be more out in the future. Cheers.